So we were just talking backstage. You were just DJing in Italy a few days ago, and you're DJing here in New York at the Flash Factory in a few days.
I had a very interesting DJ in Italy. There's a team, you may know, Juventus, Torino, the best team in Italy. And I performed.
Sound excited, people. The best team in Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. And I performed in front of 41,000 people, way up there and looking down to all the guys, and it was incredible.
Now, one thing you mentioned when we were backstage that I didn't realize is that DJing really started for you here in New York. You were saying your first times DJing were in Brooklyn. Was that right?
Yeah, at the Outpost in Brooklyn. It was a great audience, the sound system incredible, and that's where I then got some offers, and that's what I do now for the last 13, 14, 15, about 3 years, a little more than 3 years.
Okay, all right. So I want to take you back because you just were in Italy. You were born in Italy.
Yep.
In 1940. And what first brought you to music? You've talked about getting very serious about guitar when you were about 15, 16 years old. And what was it that motivated that? What kind of music were you playing at that point?
Well, I just started, I never really played well, but there was a song of Polanka, Diana, which I loved, so I started really to play and sing, and I got an offer to become a professional musician when I was 19. And I started in Switzerland, and I played we were 3 guys, piano. Later on, I played the bass, drum, and we toured all Europe for about 7, 8 years.
And were you singing as well, or?
No, thank God, no. No, just playing.
So you toured for 7, 8 years, and then at some point you came to live in Germany, correct?
Then I finally decided that the life of a musician has to end sometime. And I decided to become a composer, which I always wanted, but I never did. So I ended up, by pure coincidence, in Berlin. I wanted to stay there for a few days, and I stood there for like 4 years. I was lucky. I had my first hit, not a big one, but a nice one, about 3 months or 4 months after I went to Berlin. Then Berlin was a little too... with the wall, you couldn't move out of the city. It was really depressing there. So I moved to Munich, which is very close to my town in Italy. It's about 2.5 hours. And that's where my career really started.
And tell me a little about that. What were those early days in Munich like?
It was great. Munich is a beautiful city, a lot of great musicians. I had 2 English guys, one guy from Iceland, very good keyboard player, and great studios. I had my own studios, Musicland, which I built it for myself, and then after a few months, they threw me out. I had the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, all those guys using the studio, and so I couldn't use it.
There was no space for you.
That's it.
Right,
I had to go to a different studio. And in Munich, that's where I found Donna Summer. She was singing actually in I think the musical Hair, which then closed, and so she was living in Munich doing background sessions, and Pete Bellotti, my co-producer, we said we needed a background singer, so she came and 2 other girls, and we thought she has a great voice. And so we did 2 songs with her great voice, and then we did one song, I Feel Love to Love You Baby, with a little voice, but very sexy voice.
There was a very sexy voice. Obviously, by this point, you've latched on to the synthesizer, and you've begun to make this music, this electronic music that really was the sound of the future.
Well, I started in '71. I had one hit. It was in the charts in the States too, called "Son of My Father," where I think it was one of the first pop songs using a synthesizer. And
Because you were working with a Moog, which was about 3 years old at that point, maybe, right? Or,
even less. I was lucky because a classical composer had one in Munich. And so I borrowed the machine and the technician, because to get a sound out of the big Moog is almost impossible. You have to connect with it. Almost impossible if you don't know well how to use it. So I did that, and I used it not too often, but then in 78, I think 78, we decided to do an album with Donna, with the sounds of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and I thought, how would a sound of the future be? So I used the Moog, which played all the instruments, the drums, the keyboards, the strings, percussion, everything through the synthesizer. And the fact that the rhythm, the tracks were really mechanical, like computerized, right. And this nice voice of Donna Summer, very romantic, and I think that was the connection between the two different sounds, which made
almost opposite kind of sounds, right?
Yeah.
Because the rhythm never moves, but that voice is very human and really
right.
Right.
And then I think 2 years later, I worked with David Bowie on the movie Cat People.
Right.
And he told me that at the same time in 77, 8, they were recording in Berlin, in the studio where I used to record.
Sure, he was working with Brian Eno, right?
With Brian Eno. And they were looking for the new sound. They thought, we have to get some new stuff. And then one day, that's what he said, one day Brian Eno came in and said, David, forget the new sounds. Giorgio Moroder found it already.
This is a famous story. I think they were working on Low at the time, perhaps.
I think they did 1 or 2 albums.
Right,
yeah.
right, and they latched onto that single and played it over and over again. It's such an amazing sound, and that sound, and certainly those soundtracks that you worked on, like the soundtrack to Midnight Express, have done so much to shape the music that is still around us now. When you're working on those first Donna Summer songs, and they're like 12 minutes, 17 minutes long, were you specifically thinking, well, let's just put this on and people can dance all night? Was that the intention?
Well, not unfortunately, but fortunately, Neil Bogart, the owner of Casablanca,
The label that you were working with, yeah.
Right, he released Love to Love You as a single, and one night at 3 o'clock at night, in the morning, he called me and said, Giorgio, last night I had a party, and he didn't give me any details, but he said...
He was famous for his parties.
Right. And he said he had to put the same song on over and over, so he said, why don't you do a long version?
Okay.
Which was perfect, because a long version was then 17 minutes, which was one side of the album.
You could do one song and you were halfway through an album.
Perfect. And actually, that was the only really long song which I did, 17 minutes. But I think that song really, that version really made the song that successful. Plus, the DJs, they would put the song on, go for a beer, and come back, and the
song was still
playing.
It was a good time.
And people were still dancing.
Good time to take a break. Of course, you worked on all those classic albums with Donna Summer, but you also began, I guess, to fulfill your goal to be a composer when you began to work with movie soundtracks. And Midnight Express won you the first of, I believe, 3 Academy Awards.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between the Midnight Express score and, say, the soundtrack work you did for movies like Top Gun. And I just want to know, how did you approach those? When you did Midnight Express, were you able to watch the movie and score the music directly to the film? How did each of those work?
Yeah, I saw the movie and I loved it. And what's his name? The director, Alan Parker, loved the song I Feel Love. That's, so he said, look, you do whatever you want, but I need one piece, which is at the beginning where the kid runs away.
Right.
I need that kind of a sound, that driving thing. And I did the chase. And I composed the rest and recorded it with my assistant. And he came, I remember, to Munich on a Sunday afternoon, and we did the whole mix in one day, one afternoon. Actually, there is not that much music in the movie anyway. And it started with that one. Then I did a great movie with Richard Gere,
American Gigolo,
which I was lucky to have a big hit, Call Me, with Blondie. Then I did the now very successful Scarface movie. And Scarface, as the movie at the beginning, didn't do well. But then when the video came out, it started like, it's almost like a cult movie now.
Well, I mean, it became such a cultural touchstone, particularly for the hip-hop generation, and that music has been sampled so much on so many different hip-hop songs. So you had a chance to work with Debbie Harry again on that soundtrack.
I did a song called Yayo.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Top Gun soundtrack.
Well, with Top Gun, I did 4 songs.
Right.
The first one came out, Danger Zone, which I think went to #1. And then my best song, Take My Breath Away.
The Berlin song. And you've mentioned that's your best song. Tell me why. What makes you feel that way?
First of all, the sounds like the beginning, dong, dong, ding, 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 which is, you know, me as a bass player. I was really fascinated by that sound. Then the melody is nice. Da, 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 da. It's kind of a little bit Italian melodic wise. Terry Nunn sang it beautiful. The whole setup, how it continues and then gets even higher in key, and it worked really well for the movie. It's in the movie 3 or 4 times, but then instrumental. So I think it was part of musically a part of even the score.
So, of course, we know part of your story very well from your appearance on the Daft Punk record, Random Access Memories. When they came to you and asked you to be a part of that project, were you aware of how venerated your work was by a younger generation of DJs and electronic musicians?
Not really. When Thomas and Guimond, when they asked me if I wanted to work with them, I said, yeah, but why would you want to work with me? And they say, oh, we love your songs, and we love your sounds. And that was really the first time when I thought, maybe I did something which inspired some of the musicians, like some English guys who did electronic music later on. And it was a fun thing with Daft Punk, because I thought they wanted me to come in and compose some songs with them. No, they said they composed by themselves. So they just said, just come in and talk about your life. And so I started when I was 15. So they recorded about 2 hours. They know all my secrets, and I hope they're not releasing them. And
I mean, if you want a really long song where the DJ can take a very long break, maybe they can put out that 2-hour version.
Right.
Your album, recent album, Deja Vu. You work with Sia, with Charlie XCX, with Britney Spears, with many others. tell me those sessions. It's a combination. You were able to work with some people in the studio face to face, or
Very little, very little. You know, the recording system or the way it's working now is totally different from like 20, 30 years ago. There's a lot of stuff done by email.
right?
For example, Sia, I composed the tracks, I recorded them, had part of the melody. I gave it to Sia. She sang it, I don't know where, but probably at her house. She has a studio in Los Angeles. And about 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, she gave me the final product. She wrote the top line, the lyrics, and she even mixed it. I mean, temporary, but it was a great product. And I like it because it's less work for me. And second, if I hear, if you compose everything and then get in the studio, you kind of miss a little bit that objectivity. Because, well, you hear it hundreds of times and then you say, oh, well, yeah, it's great, it's the best. But if you hear it by somebody else doing it and you hear it finished, then
You get a little distance. You
yeah,
get the
distance.
chance to
Oh
take
yeah,
a
I
step away.
like it, I love it, or maybe not. So in that sense, it's really good.
The whole nature of a studio has changed so much from the 60s when you started to now.
Well, I have about 5 musicians worldwide. I have 2 musicians in Los Angeles, 1 in London, 2 guys in Germany, 1 in Stockholm. So, and for example, I did lately a song where I needed a guitar, and I was in Italy, so I called my friend in Los Angeles. Okay, I sent you the tracks, get me a guitar. So he did it. He played it back to me. So that's quite a way to do it now. And strings, I would do them in Germany, for example. And so by sending the stuff, they do it. And it's great because they give a lot of input. Although I must say, if you're in the studio with a musician, that's better, because then you really can not animate, but what's the word?
Inspire each other,
The musician.
Yeah.
But that's how it works now.
So the working methods have changed, but a lot of the sound for you has remained very consistent over a course of 30 years or more. You know, there's really that romantic quality and that driving machine rhythm quality that you still go to.
Well, I think everybody should do the things you know how to do them. And I know synthesizers, and I don't know the latest because the sounds of everything, drums, keyboards, and they change not by the minute, but by the month. Like you think you have a great kick, and then the specialist comes in and says, well, you know, that kick was in 6 months ago, but now it's out. So that I usually now do just good demos, but I'm not going to try to get the newest sounds, because you have to be so. It's such a work to go and find them, and
So it's almost like you're doing it architecturally. You're drawing the plan, and you let somebody else come in and do some of the finishing touches.
Yeah. It would be. I wouldn't even know how. Well, a lot of my guys, they not only have all the latest sound, but they create sounds. So those sounds you cannot buy them because they are private, right? So to get those sounds, I use the musician who has them.
Sure. We've got time for some questions from the audience. We have one right here.
So you mentioned working with David Bowie. I was wondering if you had any fond memories or funny stories you can share.
With David, okay, so I did a song called The Cat People. I gave it to him. He was in... Actually, first he wanted to see the movie, Cat People, which is a really weird movie, and we thought it would fit his image very well. So I sent him the tracks, and he watched the movie, and so he wrote the lyrics. We went to Montreux in Switzerland, where he lived at the time, and he came to the hotel for dinner. We talked about it, And then he said, okay, so let's start working tomorrow. I said, okay, so I thought maybe 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. He said, no, I come for breakfast and we go to the studio. So we went in the studio probably at 11 with the director, Paul Schrader, and he did 2 takes. You know, he's an incredible great.
Sure.
2 takes and said, okay, that's done. And the director said, it's impossible. You cannot have a song in 2 takes. We do 10 takes for each. So David said, well, if you really want, we can do another one, but we're done. Okay. And that's it.
And it's an incredibly intense vocal performance too. I mean,
see those eyes so blue,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever,
wow.
green.
2 takes. Sinatra only used to do 1, so he did twice as many as Sinatra. Right there, he's giving Paul Schrader even more than the great. More from the audience. Right
Hello,
back here.
sir. Over here. You didn't change the game. You created the game for so many people out there, and we thank you for your beautiful music. The soundtrack to Midnight Express is one of my favorite soundtracks ever, so thank you for that. I know you're playing a show in Brooklyn in a couple of days. How do you approach for a show like that? Do you go in with a specific game plan, or do you feel the vibe of the crowd?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I have to play all my hits. That's what people want. I would love to get in and create new stuff, but whenever I do something new, people say, oh, no, we want to hear hot stuff, David Bowie and all that. So I'm a little bit limited with my choice, but so to make it a little...
You're just limited to some of the greatest dance songs of the last 30, 40 years.
Well,
That's
yeah,
a little,
but I love...
little handicap.
I love to add some EDM songs,
Sure.
but I'm going to change my whole set now. I just do my disco songs and famous disco songs, Chic and Diana Ross. So it's one big dance.
Sounds like a good party. We got time for one more question. Right here.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So basically, I wanted to know what your opinion is on like the state of music as far as dance music and electronic music and like EDM. It's because you mentioned you work with like Sia and Charlie XCX, which is she's kind of a newcomer. So how do you like mesh with those type of people, like the newcomers on the scene and like those sounds?
Well, I love EDM. I think all the sounds are so incredible. The recording, the mix, the effects, the delays. It's absolutely fantastic. I know a lot of people don't like EDM, but I love it. And like Calvin Harris, which is kind of EDM, but David Guetta, Avicii. That's what I'm basically listening. I'm listening to pop too, like Justin Bieber, which has great songs lately. But the songs I really like is EDM. And Skrillex, my idol. I wish I could play as well as he plays, and I wish I could know the little secrets he uses to get those sounds.
Okay. Wow. Skrillex is your idol. You're many of our idols. So, Giorgio, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Okay.